So this is the new Insta360 One X2, and this is a $2,000 professional 360 camera. I compared them for video quality. And what was in this box that Insta360 sent me?
So do you have an Insta360 camera or you're thinking of getting one? In this video, we're going to answer the most important questions about the new Insta360 One X2, the ones you want to know. First, should Insta360 One X owners upgrade to the new Insta360 One X2? Second, what about Insta360 One R owners? Should they upgrade? 3. Which is better, the Insta360 One X2 or the Insta360 One R? Why did Insta360 create the new X2? Finally, which camera should you buy, the Insta360 One X2 or the Insta360 One R? Now I've added timestamps so you can navigate to the section that's most relevant to you.
Before we answer those questions, how did the X2 compare to the professional 360 camera? Well, it's hard to evaluate the dynamic range because the Zcam S1 shows its darker exposure, but in terms of detail, the X2 seems to have at least as much, if not more detail than the Zcam S1. And so far it seems that the X2's video quality seems to be as good, if not better than this professional camera. I plan to do another test next time, but for now, let's answer your questions.
So number 1, should Insta360 One X owners upgrade? Well, the way I'm going to answer that is by giving you the key benefits of upgrading from the Insta360 One X. Number 1, waterproofing. The new X2 and the One R are both waterproof, even without a case. Number 2, the LCD screen. In daylight, it's kind of hard to read the LCD display of the Insta360 One X, but with the X2 and the One R, both use OLED displays that are very easy to read even in bright sunlight. 3, easier to control. With the One X, you can make adjustments in the camera's menu, but you have to go several layers deep. With the new Insta360 One X2 and the One R, you have an easy to use touchscreen with an intuitive interface, and the settings that you want are never more than 2 or 3 levels away. 4, view your photos and videos in the camera. So finally, you can show your family and friends your 360 photos and videos right in your camera. And yes, they will be stabilized, and yes, they will see the 360 view. 5, better photos. The difference is that the One R and X2 both take HDR photos with up to 9 shots in RAW plus JPEG for amazing dynamic range and excellent quality. Next, better stabilization. The One X has great stabilization, but the new X2 and the One R both have better stabilization. So to test the Insta360 One X2 stabilization, we're going to take it to a special torture test. Here, we're going to put the Insta360 One X2 inside this ball. Then we're going to see how good its stabilization is. Here's one of my favorite features. The date and time don't reset. On the Insta360 One X, if the battery runs down or you remove the battery, the date and time reset back to, I think, 2017 or something like that. With the One R and the new X2, the date and time will be preserved even if you remove the battery. 8, a protective lens cover that doesn't need a case. The Insta360 One R and the new X2 both have lens covers that can protect the lens without having to add a case over your camera. Number 9, non-360 photos and videos. Both the One R and the new X2 are great at shooting non-360 photos and videos. Gonna test it. Light is waning, but we'll try. See, I finally opened up my eyes, and I saw me coming back to life. That I'd be better without you inside. It's time to be someone I want to recognize. The future starts right now. I made a reservation. Now, what if you already have the Insta360 One R? Should you get the X2? Well, in my opinion, the One R is about as good as the X2. So there's not as much reason to get the X2 if you already have the One R. The only time I would recommend an X2 for a One R owner is if you use both the 360 mod and the 4K mod frequently. If you use both the 360 mod and the 4K mod or 1-inch mod frequently, then you've probably found that sometimes it can be cumbersome to switch between those mods. Getting the X2 as a separate standalone 360 camera can complement your One R, and then you can use the One R just for the 1-inch mod or the 4K mod. Then that way you'll be able to use either 360 mod or a 4K mod or 1-inch mod immediately without having to switch mods. Alright, so let's say you've decided you want to upgrade. Which one should you get? The new Insta360 One X2 or the Insta360 One R? Now let's compare 14 different factors to help you decide. Number one, 360 photos. Both the One R and the X2 take photos at the same resolution of 6080 by 3040. Now in addition, the new X2 can take 360 photos in pure shot mode. So this works very well in low light conditions.
When I compared the 1R and X2 photos, I was surprised to find that the X2 was much more detailed. However, the X2 colors were way too saturated. I assume they'll fix this. I also compared the X2 and Theta Z1, and I found that the X2 had almost as much detail as the Z1, although the Z1 has much less noise and more accurate colors.
Number two, non-360 photos. Now the One R can take excellent quality non-360 photos thanks to the 4K mod or the 1-inch mod. Now the X2 can also take non-360 photos. It has two modes for that. Number one is the wide mode, which is basically a non-360 photo using only one lens. The second mode is called the Insta Pano, which is basically a panoramic shot. It's almost like an equirectangular view, but cropped. Now both the One R and the X2 can take their non-360 photos using pure shot mode. So for non-360 photos, the advantage goes to the One R. The only thing is that the X2 is more convenient. Next, 360 videos. The Insta360 One R and the new X2 take 360 videos at the same resolution of 5760 by 2880, which is also the same as the Insta360 One X. The difference is that the One X2 can take them in vivid color profile, which has higher contrast and looks more attractive. But you can adjust One X videos to make them look more like the Insta360 One X2 or the One R. Now, in addition to vivid mode, another advantage of the X2 for 360 videos is that you can shoot them with multi-view. So while taking your video, you can see yourself at the same time. Now, what about video quality?
I found that the 1X, the X2, and the 1R all have similar amounts of detail. The big difference between them is that the X2 can use the vivid color profile in 360 video mode.
Next, non-360 photos and videos. So 360 videos are great, but sometimes we don't need a 360 view. Now both the One R and the new X2 are great at non-360 photos and videos. First, let's talk about the One R. The One R can take non-360 photos using the 4K mod or the 1-inch mod, which is 5K. In addition, you can use the new vivid color profile for both the 4K mod and the 1-inch mod. So for non-360 videos, the new X2 has a mode called wide mode, which is basically a non-360 video. The benefits are, number one, you don't have to stitch it. You can use it straight out of the camera. And number two, it has even better stabilization than the 4K mod or the 1-inch mod. And if you use the wide mode in pro stabilization mode, then you can change the aspect ratio and get even better stabilization. You can even turn the camera around in 360 or upside down and it will still be stabilized and level. Next, stitching. The One X2's body is thinner than the One R, so there's a shorter distance between its lenses, so that means less parallax stitching error. On the other hand, with the One R's thicker body, it's easier to use almost any monopod and make it invisible. And in addition, there are third-party FPV drones that will let you use the One R and make the drone totally invisible. Next, audio quality. Now the Insta360 One R's audio quality for the in-camera microphone is not that good. That's because the One R's in-camera microphone picks up strange sounds from the camera bracket. By comparison, the One X2 can capture spatial audio with its 4 microphones. So for in-camera audio quality, the winner is the new X2. Now for external microphones, both the One R and X2 have excellent options. First of all, both of them can use the AirPods. And second, both of them can use a USB Type-C to microphone adapter. There is a difference, however. The X2 can use a special low-profile microphone adapter. It's going to be a new accessory that's going to be available for the X2 soon. On the other hand, for the One R, there are 3D printed mods for the popular Rode Wireless Go. Next, let's talk about the mount. The new X2 uses a standard 1/4-20 tripod hole. The One R, on the other hand, uses a GoPro style mount. Now you can get a GoPro to 1/4-20 adapter, but it has a tendency to move or swivel, so it can move your camera out of alignment and make your monopod or selfie stick visible. So the X2's mount is definitely more convenient for 360 shooting. Next, waterproofing. Both the One R and X2 are waterproof even without a case. But with the One R, you have to use the camera bracket. In addition, if you're using certain accessories such as the vertical battery, then the One R loses its waterproofing. The X2, on the other hand, has no such restrictions. So for waterproofing, the advantage goes to the new X2. Now what about ruggedness? Well, the One R has a lens guard which can protect the camera in rugged environments. And what about the X2? Well, Insta360's representatives told me that there's also going to be a lens guard for the new X2, but it isn't out yet. Another important factor to consider for ruggedness is that the One R is modular. So if you damage the lens, you can simply replace the mod instead of having to replace the whole camera. So for ruggedness, the advantage goes to the One R. So what about shot labs? Well, according to Insta360's representative, both the One R and X2 will be able to use the same shot labs. So this one is a tie. Next, battery life. Well, for this one, I found that the X2 has a better battery life than the One R. On the other hand, the One R has a boosted battery, and if you use that, then it will have a longer battery life than the X2. Finally, other features. The One R has other features. Number 1, auto tracking webcam mode. If you use the 4K mod, you can have it track you automatically, and it's great when you're using it for Zoom or social media. Second, the aerial mod. This is a mod for the One R that lets you take invisible drone photos using a Mavic Pro or Mavic 2 Pro. 3, filters. The One R has the world's first ND filters for a consumer 360 camera, and it's not clear whether such a filter will be available for the new X2. Finally, a 3D mod. Now, the 3D mod was shown at the launch of the One R, but has yet to be released. I've been trying to convince Insta360 to release the 3D mod. If you want the 3D mod, include a comment below with the hashtag 3D mod, and I'm going to collect all those comments and show them to Insta360. As you can see, the One X2 and the One R have very similar features. So why did Insta360 create the X2? Here's the reason. Because the One R is modular, it's very expensive to produce. It's not just the camera itself, it's also the accessories. Even the battery is more expensive. And at the same time, not everyone needs the 4K mod or 1-inch mod or even any of the other mods. Some people just want a 360 camera. So that's why Insta360 created the X2. Alright, so who should buy the One X2 and who should buy the One R? Well, take a look at the One R's mods. You have the 4K mod, the 1-inch mod. the aerial mod, and maybe the 3D mod. If you want any of those mods, then go for the One R. On the other hand, if you're a 360 purist, you only care about 360 photos and videos, then I recommend the new X2. Now I have several other videos for the new X2. Don't miss them, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in 360.